Good evening, and welcome to Before the Doors Open, a four-part conversation series presented by the PGCC Galleries. This series is designed to illuminate the labor, ethics, and decision-making that shapes exhibitions long before the doors open to the public. I am your host, moderator, Dr. Reff Presco, and I serve as the Gallery Director for Prince George's Community College. As some of you may already know, especially those of you familiar with PGCC school community, a new Marlboro Hall building has been constructed on our campus. Housed within this new building is an amazing new gallery space that will soon be open with our first major exhibition occurring in August of this year. Since this is a relatively new territory for our college, I designed this series to explore various aspects of museum and gallery experiences that are invaluable to the experiences of viewers, from students to those of us with an appreciation for visual art. Today's conversation behind the label, focuses on the unseen work of curating, running gallery spaces, and shaping institutional narratives, work that often remains invisible, yet deeply impacts how art is understood, valued, and remembered. I'm honored to be joined by three leaders whose expertise spans institutions, independent galleries, and cultural stewardship. My guests are Eric Key, Myrtis Bedolla, and Marta Reid Jackson. Let me share a little of the brilliance of my guests, beginning with Eric Key. Eric Key has more than 35 years of experience in art administration. He is currently the Arts Program Director at University of Maryland Global Campus. He has served as Executive Director of the Kansas African American Museum in Wichita. Formerly, he served as the Director of Programs for the Black Academy of Arts and Letters in Dallas, Texas. Also Curator for the African American Museum, Dallas. Assistant Curator of African American History at Old City Park, also in Dallas, Texas. And Special Collections Librarian and University Archivist at Prairie View A&M University. Mr. Key has curated more than 200 culturally diverse exhibitions. Since he began his tenure at UMGC in 2008, the university has added almost 2,200 individual pieces to its collection, while at the same time increasing the percentage of the collection that is on public display at any given time. Welcome, Eric. How are you doing?
I'm well, and yourself? And thank you for having me.
Awesome. Okay, my next guest is Dr. Myrtis Bedolla, who is the founder and proprietor of Galerie Myrtis, an emerging blue chip gallery specializing in work by African American and African diasporic artists. Her career spans more than 3 decades as a gallerist, art advisor, and curator, distinguished by a sustained commitment to equity, scholarship, and market advocacy. By invitation of the U.S. Department of State, Dr. Bedolla served as a member of the United States delegation to Dakar, Senegal, for the 2024 Dakar Biennale. In 2022, Bedolla made history as the inaugural African-American curator of the Afrofuturist Manifesto, Reimagining Blackness, which is an award-winning exhibition presented during the 59th Venus Biennale as part of the European Cultural Center's Personal Structures exhibition. Dr. Bedolla has gained national attention for her partnership with Christie's Auction House in a landmark collaboration advancing equity and inclusion in the secondary market, receiving coverage in the New York Times, ArtNet, and Culture magazine. In 2023, Bedolla received an honorary doctorate of fine art from the Maryland Institute College of Art in recognition of her curatorial leadership and scholarly contributions. She also received a governor's citation from Maryland Governor Wes Moore, underscoring her impact on the arts and cultural landscape. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from the University of Maryland Global Campus. completed curatorial training at the Maryland Institute College of Art, and earned certificates in cultural theory for curators and curatorial procedures from the Node Center for Curatorial Studies in Berlin, Germany. Dr. Bedolla, thank you for being here. Can you say hello to our guests?
Yes, and thank you for having me. I'm honored to be a part of this discussion, and thank you for the introduction.
Thanks. And my third guest, I also want to welcome Marta Reid Stewart, who is the founding chair of the Museum Studies Department at Duke Ellington School of the Arts and a dedicated educator committed to shaping the next generation of museum professionals. With a distinguished career spanning museum education, curation, and academic leadership, she brings both scholarly depth and real-world experience into the classroom. Ms. Stewart earned her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Howard University, HU, and a graduate degree in teaching in the field of museum education from George Washington University, where she received the Marcella Brenner Award for Creativity. Her academic foundation has informed a career devoted to expanding access to arts education and cultural scholarship. She has previously worked as an educator and curator at the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery, the National Museum of African Art, and the Phillips Collection, bringing invaluable institution experience to her teaching. Her outstanding contributions to arts education have been recognized with the Stephen Sondheim Award for Inspirational Teaching and the Washington, D.C. Mayor's Award for Excellence in Arts Education. She is also the recipient of grants from the Smithsonian Institution, the National Endowment for the Arts, the J. Paul Getty Museum, and the Institute for Museum and Library Services. This panel indeed is comprised of professionals with institutional knowledge, public sector insight. They are systems level thinkers, artist advocates, combined with their curatorial vision and institutional ethics. I am simply honored you are joining us this evening for this discussion. Thank you all for being here and for lending your time. And please also say hello to Marta.
You know. Thank you so much. I am so pleased and honored to be here. Thank you, Dr. Reff Presco.
So, you guys are all heavy hitters to me. So, before we get into the discussion, I want to share with our audience members who are tuning in on social media and YouTube. You are welcome to join us by offering questions in the chat. And, if time permits, we will try to get as many of those questions answered. Thank you for being here. And so, what I would like to do before we even start talking about what's behind the labels, the question for you, all of my panelists, is what is one part of your work that the public rarely sees, but is essential to what you do?
Oh, well, I'll start. I guess the public rarely sees the installation of the works. From the beginning of, packing, unpacking, making sure the frames are correct, clean, and then installation. They very rarely see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would add that the public rarely sees the amount of time spent in research, an important role that a curator, an important role for a curator is to put the work into the exhibition into context, whether that be social, political, historic, and there are many others, but it's research. I spent a lot of time researching to contextualize the work that will be presented for the audience to engage with.
Mm-hmm. I would say the idea, development, the finding the objects and finding the story that the objects are going to tell.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And so this next question is to Eric. From an institutional perspective, what kinds of labor and decision making happen long before an exhibition opens that most audiences and even artists rarely consider?
I think that's the discussion. I think Myrtis hit on it. Is really learning the background of the artist, understanding who they are, and really getting a feel for their works. Um, I think that most of it as an institution is really spending time in the field where you're doing studio visits and you're talking to artists, and you bring them into the fold. And once you've gotten familiar with their work, what their practice is, then it becomes pretty easy at that point until you get into fundraising and installation and all those kinds of things.
Okay. Does anyone else want to add to that?
Well,
Well, go ahead.
no, just that Eric really hit the nail on the head. I mean,
Mhm.
there's so much time spent trying to discover the artist whose work will support whatever curatorial approach or concept we're aiming to, present. And so that's a lot of groundwork, a lot of research. Whose narratives, whose stories will bring light to the conceptual vision of the curator.
Mhm. So in my area, we're not only charged with developing an exhibition, that's kind of the culminating activity of what we do here at Ellington, because all of the different functions of a museum convene with the exhibition. So collection, registration, conservation, education, and all. But we're charged with actually teaching students how to do these things, teaching them about the theories and practices behind them, and then having them actually have some practical application of what they're learning. So our exhibits end up being not just aesthetic exhibits where we're looking at various artists. We're actually charged with sometimes finding more educational, which sometimes can be more difficult given the time constraints, the money to tell a narrative. But we have to do them both because we want them to be familiar, armed with the ability to do all of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And I agree. I mean, the only thing that separates my gallery from a museum and its approach is that I'm commercial. But in terms of, I have a staff and we all take the same approach to building and developing an exhibition. And our programming is an important part of our community engagement component. So while we stand and exist to sell the art, we really operate from a museum model.
Okay. All right. Thank you. My next question is to you, Myrtis.
Yes.
As a gallery owner, how do you balance the visible presentation of work with the behind the scenes responsibilities, such as the logistics, the relationships, the financial risk,
Hmm.
the care for artists that make exhibitions possible?
I'm not so sure I balance it because, of course, we aim to do so, but it's a lot of work. And I think that's why I really am pleased to be a part of this conversation because I know myself and my colleagues, there is so much that goes into the development of an exhibition and, the framework around that. Um, it's just what is centered to our program here is that we want people to come into this space and feel welcomed here, regardless of whether or not they can purchase a work of art or not. And so that is what part of the reason that we take on this model of a museum experience, because quite frankly, a lot of the people that come through my door, until they see themselves represented on a museum wall, many older folks have not even visited a museum space. So here, because it's for many maybe a more relaxed environment in which they can enter into, we want the educational component. There's always the takeaway. There's always a discussion around the takeaway. What do we want people to to walk away knowing? What do we want people to understand about themselves, or if the work that's on the walls doesn't speak to their personal life experience, what is it that we want them to learn about the plight of others? So we try to balance that, I guess, with the aesthetic value, the educational components, and of course, we very much are seated in the commercial side of that, because that is what keeps the gallery going. And so that's part of what we aim to do here.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything to chime in on regarding this? I know that Myrtis is a gallery owner, but you all have also this type of knowledge base.
I was gonna simply say I'm with Myrtis. I don't think it's a balance. I think each component of the museum world, from practices to receiving to hanging to returning, it all kind of weighs out the same. If you had to put a percentage by it, and all of it is just as important, because I always approach art from a standpoint that every piece is worth $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the care aspect of it,
mm-hmm.
the respect of the work. And then every artist is worth $1 million, the care and the respect of the artist and their words. And so what we try to do, even when the works come in, is just to make sure that they're utmost respected and the stories are told. It's not an easy, there's no way easy. And when you were speaking of the real HU, I'm a Hampton grad. It came through its museum studies program. So okay. I know about those practices. I still have my manual that taught me how to package a piece of artwork using a raw egg. All of those things, and those are the kind of things that has taken me from point A to where I am now. When I receive work, the condition reports, and making sure the insurance is in place, and it goes on until the work is returned.
Okay. All right, thank you. My next question is to you, Marta. The curatorial labor often involves holding multiple narratives at once. How do you approach the responsibility, especially when exhibitions carry cultural or historical weight?
Well, as I said, we let the objects tell the story, and one of our number one priorities is trying to get it right, trying to report the truth as we know it. And that includes identifying objects as they truly are. If it's a facsimile or if it's made by someone who's imitating someone else, all of that gets recorded. All of that is for the public view. We always stress the ethical practices of curation. If we have to censor ourselves because we know that this object is first of all, maybe shouldn't even be in our collection, and there's some question about it, we will have a curatorial censorship. So in this school, in this operation, this little shop over here at 35th and R, we really try to train our students, and we do, to do the right thing. So they learn all about repatriation and galleries and institutions who are starting to do that and why that's so important. And this is probably one of the reasons when I learned about this panel, I couldn't help but think about the African Burial Ground Project that actually came to be shortly after I signed up for this. I don't want to say a job. I want to say vocation over here, chairing this department.
And for those of you who are tuning in, Marta is actually going to share more information about that in a little bit. What does it mean to write a label responsibly? So what should labels do, and what should they resist doing?
What they should do is reflect what is, what the audience is actually looking at with the owner of the work, the creator of the work, the title of the work, the date if it's available, the medium, the size. Um, Having that, I kind of shy away from the title because I tend to like for my viewer to spend time with the artwork before they look at the label. Particularly when you're talking about or dealing with abstract art, because you get a chance to commune with it in a way that another person may not have. And it begins to take on its own voice, and the artwork takes on its own meaning to you. And then the support happens to be that label, and that label, what the artist titled the piece. And then you begin to say, I got it. Oh, I didn't think of that. So the label becomes an important factor, even from a standpoint, if you have expanded labels with details, maybe the artist has written something about the piece and you have that on the label, or just the artist's statement. You can do it all kinds of ways. But we use a very simple approach when we do our labels.
Okay.
Well,
Go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if that was for everyone to respond to, or you just wanted Eric to respond.
I got one special for you.
Okay.
From the gallery side, right? But everyone here is from the gallery. How do you think labels influence value, the interpretation, and even the market perception?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. The label, and I will extend it to maybe, my experiences curating within the gallery space and outside of the gallery space when I'm working independently in collaboration with maybe universities or with museums and acting as a curator. And then we extend it to like the wall text or a didactic if we get really deep in terms of interpretation. So in the gallery space, the labels are very much like what Eric stated, where we have, the information about the artist. But beyond that, and of course, titles and so on and so forth. But beyond that, what kind of brings a level of, what does bring a level of value to it is the artist's statement, which allows for deeper understanding, especially given that from the maker, and also the artist's resume, which is another important document that adds at least an understanding of who that artist is within the marketplace and what their experiences have been. Outside of the gallery space, the wall text and didactic, again, we're talking about putting the work into historic context, and that's an important part of what the labeling serves, an important role that the labeling serves.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this is for all of you. How does institutional voice shape public understanding, especially when dealing with culturally significant or contested histories?
I'll try. I think the institutions actually provide its community with a space to see something they may not have seen elsewhere. And just seeing those work, I'll use traditional African art, carvings. They may not have seen those works before or only saw them on television, but once they go into a museum, then they're face to face with the carvings. They can see the texture, they can see the labels, they can see the intro panel, they can see all of it and get an understanding. So I think institutions are important to help broaden the minds of its community. And that goes into that education aspect. I hope I answered the question.
Anyone else want to chime in?
So we are an institution. This is DC Public Schools. So we're in the constraints of what can be allowed in DC Public Schools. And I realized that During my tenure, things have shifted a bit. We do have freedom of speech, so we should be able to show images that we don't have to do a big curatorial censorship, but we have to be mindful of those things. We need to have some kind of document in place that says what the procedure is if there is an object that gives someone pause. Do we rip it off the wall, or do we keep it there, have a conversation? Do we use it as a catalyst for conversation and possibly awareness, openness, and change? So, yeah, we have to be mindful of what you're doing, but we don't shy away from what students are drawn to producing. We're here to have their creative spirit wax, not wane.
I want to chime in. Just I think it's being aware of our environment. As our model is, we don't censor artwork, particularly in the main gallery, which is a rotating gallery, and we are a very public program because we're located in a conference center, but all the wall spaces throughout the 4 floors belong to the university's collection. So we do get guests who just happen to be coming in for the weekend at the hotel, but we also have our, everyday patrons. And then we have some things like we try not to censor nudity, for an example, when it's in the main gallery. And then we just have to be conscious of it when we're putting it throughout the building, because we do know patrons are walking through. I mean, we even have to deal with things like religious groups that may come to the building and they don't like figures. So they're calling me and asking, can they going to be there over the weekend? Can they cover the artwork? And the answer is no, not in the main gallery. So we have to deal with and have those conversations and put it in context for what it is. And generally you said something like, you wouldn't go to the Smithsonian and ask them to cover their figures. So why do it here? But that's the relationship between where we're located in that relationship with the hotel venue. So, but it's a continuous growing process, and most people outside the museum world don't know of these conditions or how we rather present things in the correct way, even if sometimes it touches the wrong nerve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with both what Marta and Eric have said. And, I guess we just have to remember that our institutions, gallery and museum settings, are institutions that hold great power and influence. Marta is shaping minds. Eric, his space is on view for the world because a lot of visitors go through there. And for us, we want our community and beyond to know that Galerie Myrtis is a safe space where art is shown and is uncensored. And we support, most of our exhibitions are curated around they're socially and politically driven. And there are times when I've had artists present work and, one woman said to me, I didn't think I'd ever be able to put this on a wall outside of my home because it was a work about our country. This was many years ago. And she just felt that the piece was so controversial that it may not be embraced outside of her own private space. So, it's important for us to have social discourse, one in which maybe we agree to disagree, but we do that respectfully. And the institutions that are presented here tonight are ones that support that view.
Okay. Let me ask you this, since you brought up some of the subject matter that comes up in the works that are associated with your gallery, and this is for all of you, what are your thoughts about the political landscape and the conversations and the activity around museum exhibitions within the last year or so?
Oh, God.
Well, I'll chime in first because I once represented Amy Sherrill and I was hanging out with her on Saturday. So I am really happy with her decision not to allow her work to be censored. And my gosh, the world has embraced and supported her beyond measure. The BMA has reported like her exhibition in its history as one that with the highest attendance, and it's just been great because we have small minds that think they control the world, but there's a bigger consciousness there that says no, that is not the case. And my fall exhibition, I'm revisiting the subject of our, this is the 250th year of our nation and the 20th anniversary year for my gallery. So I'm revisiting a subject that was the first in my exhibitions, in my gallery space here, and it's Stars and Stripes, Pride or Despair. And we're examining the American flag and what it symbolizes. And when I held that exhibition first, my inaugural here in my space in Baltimore, it was during the Bush administration and the Patriot Act. So here we are almost 20 years later. Um, in that happened in like 2008. So we're almost 20 years later. And and we are still feeling under attack, and there's still questions about who is an American and how is that defined? What does that look like? So, it just is I think it speaks to the importance of standing firm in our truth and allowing for us to um, examine how we exist and have that interpreted visually by artists whose imaginations I don't hold, and which is why I'm just so honored to be in a place where I can provide a space where that can take place, and that being imagery that you know speaks to our existence, speaks to what's troubling us, and then again we can come together and have conversations around it.
Okay. So I recognize how emotionally invested I can become when I engage with, the curatorial process. I often wonder about being thorough, as well as being thoughtful, and as I can, pretty much with the content of whatever the project is, as far as an exhibition. So, what I want to share is this experience that I had recently. In November, I drove to Delaware to view an exhibition titled Almost Unknown. It was at the Winterthur Museum. Did any of you catch it? No? Okay. The exhibition was imaginative, intersecting literature, visual storytelling, and fine art. So there are various installations referencing historical events. They had a vessel by Dave the Potter. I was happy to see that. Um, Amazing painting by Robert S. Duncanson. I was blown away by it. It was so beautiful.
Mm.
Also on a pedestal encased under glass was an original copy of Phyllis Wheatley's Book of Poetry. As I
Mm.
ran the didactics, I noticed something pretty significant. It mentioned Phyllis Wheatley's image multiple times, but neglected to even mention Scipio Moorhead, who was an enslaved engraver whose image on this book is attributed to. I was stunned by this and actually stood there staring at everybody that sort of walked up and, read and observed and walked away. And I felt a loss for them. The fact that the exhibition was titled Almost Unknown and Moorhead still remains unknown to most. Hurt my heart, really it did. And some of us may have had these experiences at other museums. And those of you who are here with us, you can share in the chat if you'd like. But I want to sort of ask you, have you ever had to sort of deal with perhaps, a hurt or something based on the labels or missed information? Or have you ever had to encounter anything like this? And how do you maneuver through those difficult situations?
I have, and I'm going to name the museum because I was so disappointed with them. So I went to the Crystal Bridges Museum when it first opened. I was invited down with a group of other museums and curators for a private event and was given a walkthrough. And there was a painting that was created in the 1800s. I can't remember the exact date, but I do remember that it was created during the period of slavery. And in the picture, or in the painting, were images of Black people in the field. And the label said workers. And I was stunned because in my mind, a worker is the definition of someone that's earning a salary, being compensated for their labor. And I said to one of the curators, I said, I think this is misstated because this is a painting of with slaves. These individuals are enslaved. Why does it say workers? And I can't remember her exact response, but it was something to the effect, well, they just had to be sensitive to their community or something like that. And I was just like, I can't believe what I'm hearing. I doubt that it was ever changed, but the response I received was so disappointing. For me, it was another one of those moments of eraser. And this nation of ours, the inability to embrace our truth, no matter how painful it is. So that was my experience.
I'm sure over the years I've had experiences very similar. But the most thing that I grapple with museums, and I think we're still dealing with it now, is this concept that everything now is American. And when I go to a museum, I want to know the cultural group that created certain works. And I go through some of the galleries and I'm looking at the work, and I'm familiar with the artist and the work. But there's nothing that makes me feel proud other than the fact that I know that particular painting or sculpture was done by an African American. And even sometime in the writings, I get disappointed because it doesn't. You would think that in the writing, at the very least, the authors could bring attention to the cultural group that the artwork belonged to, or the artist. But most of the time, it doesn't. It just so happens that unless you are a scholar or are very familiar with these artists and their works, you can go through a gallery and look at a Tanner, and you'll look at it and it's just another work that was done in the 1800s or the 1900s, versus it is done by an African American artist. So I guess that's a kind of a personal thing that I'm grappling with right now. But at the same time, I think if I'm going to show artwork in my space, I want my audience to know as much as I can present at a given time. And then if I can't tell them everything they need to know, at least I can direct them to what they can do additional research to find some of the answers.
So I feel you on the Scipio Moorhead. He's often left out. And look, he did a drawing of Phyllis Wheatley, who wasn't believed. I mean, she had to go through so many tests just to validate that she is who she is, and what her contribution was invaluable. So I don't have a story in a museum, but I do know that recently I was looking at a publication and it had Sarah Boone as one of the inventors of one of the iterations of the ironing board. But it was a picture of Edmonia Lewis.
What?
Yes, Edmonia Lewis. So there you go. I guess sculptor, ironing board. I don't know. Okay, but
I don't
that's
want
my
to do
story.
it.
Okay.
But I think that, you know, that's a lot more work, and I guess it's a challenge, because I think people have to push themselves to learn about what they're presenting, they're talking about. And a lot of curators and a lot of writers don't go that extra mile. So you get
Mhm.
the surface, but you don't get the behind the real in-depth story. If that makes sense. And it's not an excuse, because I think that when we're writing publications, we try to, you try to do your best. And also at the same time, we're human, so we're going to miss something. But as long as you can present and do your best, and then if somebody asks you about it, have a little bit more of an intelligent response than I'm catering to my audience.
Mm.
That's doesn't quite
Oh, good.
come off well. So
Okay. I see we have some questions in the chat. Can we go to the chat, pull up some questions, see what our audience is asking us? I just moved here from, hi Yannick. I just moved here from Illinois. Is there anywhere to get information to expose? Because I have an artist that does many artwork talking about the DRC. Okay. Do you guys have a response for Yannick?
Oh, from my perspective, I was going to talk about this later on, is
Okay.
that it is the responsibility. It is the responsibility of the artist to make us aware.
Mm.
There are just two. That's TOO. Many artists for
Mhm.
us to think that we know them all, and there's the next generation of artists that are coming along. We're not going to know all of them. So I tell young artists, make yourself aware. Get to know those curators. Go to those directors. Go to those openings. Pull out a card and give it to them. In this day and time, have something on the website for us to see. Um, um, there are many institutions, all galleries all around the city, bigger ones and smaller ones. Just make yourself aware. Just go there. Leave a package.
Okay. All right. Do we have another question we can do? Okay. How do you interest older adults who have never been to a museum or gallery to visit? Okay.
Well, I'll jump in on that one.
Okay.
For the gallery, what our part of our intention is to hold exhibitions that we hope will be of interest to folks, that they will see themselves on the wall, that they will share their experiences here um, with their communities and bring them back. I love when we have like multi generations walk into the gallery space. A grandmother will bring her daughter, who will bring her son, and then they can have conversations about what they see here. And for older adults, and I'm using that term because I'm one, and the person who posed the question did also. Um, it's a way to you have, Marta's talking a lot about stories. You have these great stories, and um, from your life's experiences, and many of those stories, I would love to know more about, and how your stories might relate to an exhibition that we're hosting, or what has your collecting journey been like, and do you have a rare work in your collection? Um, that you would like to share that experience and talk about that, and if so, why has collecting art been important um, to your family, and your legacy? So art can become this great tool for engagement, and leading to conversations that can expand beyond a sale. Of course we exist for that, but I've learned so much from the people that walk through our doors. And so art becomes the catalyst for that, the mechanism for these great moments of understanding.
I'm going to chime in just a second, because I think in terms of an older audience, when we're planning our exhibition schedule, we're always trying to diversify what we're going to show for different age brackets. And we always look for things that might be interest to, in this case, we're talking about older adults. What kind of exhibition, we ask ourselves this question, what kind of exhibition that we can do that would target this particular audience? And then the staff and I we're naming some things. And the first thing that came to mind when you read the questions was you do quilting. Most people love the textile. They love the stories behind the quilts, but now to expose them to contemporary quilts and the stories within those quilts. Mm-hmm. Then you can then your education department can set up scheduled tours or programs where the older group now can come in and talk about their stories. And hopefully they can leave home and they may make a quilt or with that story in it, because quilting in itself has taken on a completely different meaning in the past 20, 25 years. They have what, as Faith Ringo said, they're story quilts, and that's what they are. They're not just something, a bed covering to keep you warm, but even that has a story. So it's that story, but that is something that usually an older generation can relate to and probably want to come see. And there are many other projects or exhibitions that can be done that would attract that older generation. And then on the flip side, you want to create something that's going to attract the younger audience. I mean, the high school and younger. What could you do that would bring them in the door? Because generally that's the last thing that they're thinking about, other than parents that we're going to a museum. And I think we continuously think outside the box in order to attract these audiences.
Mm-hmm. I'm just in agreement with all of you. I'm thinking public program, audience engagement. Find something that they would do outside the museum that they could actually do in the museum and have it some way be a segue back to the art that you're exhibiting. So that could be anything from a music concert to, as you said, maybe quilt making or something like that.
I remember when I was living in Dallas, we did a photographic exhibition. And what we did is we gave, at that time, the little Kodak cameras to people in the community. And for them to go around, and particularly we did older and we did young kids. And we wanted them to see what stories they were going to tell in these photographs. And that not only brought in the older generation who probably never would have went to a museum or talked about, living on a farm and raising pigs and processing hogs and all of this, until just a photograph from a person who now looking at the photograph, I'm looking at grandma's picture that was taken by her grandson or granddaughter, and the emotional ties that bring all of them in for that opening to see what the kid has done. And it's projects like that, I think, that helps to bridge the gap between museum and community.
Okay. Do you have another question? Thank you, Ryan. Were there any artworks that have been censored completely?
No. I had an experience where I had to go to my boss and justify why I was not going to censor the work. And once I explained to my boss says, based upon what you're saying and the location of the work, you don't censor it. But what we could do to be mindful of the audience, because we have so many entrances into the main gallery, we could go the extra mile and put up little labels before you come down, things like that. And we were willing to do that, but not to completely censor the work, no.
Okay. I see a question from Sergey. Hello, Sergey. Hello, what advice would you give artists who've chosen to create meaningful work but live and work in isolation? How should they emerge?
Mm,
That's like a Myrtis question.
yeah. Well,
Mhm.
most artists are introverts and
Mhm.
live somewhat of a reclusive life. I'm an introvert, so I feel them. But my head is always, well, I'm trying to always have my head in a book. And the literary arts is sort of where I live. But when you must come out, the times when you have to leave that studio, and if it's your intention that you want to emerge, I think just hearkening back to what Eric was saying about you have to do the work to make yourself known. And part of that is like visiting gallery spaces and visiting museum spaces. People can't discover you if they don't know that you exist. So there is a level of groundwork that you have to do. Of course, social media and, your website can certainly help, but you have to do something to drive people there. Simply because it exists isn't enough. And we've discovered really talented artists, or I should say my staff, because my head, again, is always in contracts and proposals and such. But we have, last year, we hosted an emerging artist show. And so my assistant director and the director of sales, they curated that exhibition, and they looked at artists not on our roster, but beyond our roster, who we're always looking for, like, who's the next up and coming group of artists, just so we can have a pulse on what's going on. And one of the artists that we discovered is, I bought this piece by Damilar, who is this amazing artist from Nigeria. And so, we got some exciting news to share about him in the coming months. But yeah, so I hope that that's some help in terms of how you can be discovered.
Marta, you want to jump in before I do?
Yes, I'll say one thing, Eric. I'm thinking that if you're not a total introvert and you may be a ambivert or something like that, you can find a friend who actually has a skill set to do what you need to do. Everybody has a passion, everybody has a purpose. And if you can connect with someone who can deliver that for you, who will love doing it, then that's golden. And the other thing is, if you have an IT person, that little thing called the internet, Facebook, I know someone who built a whole company just showcasing his wares. And so that's my advice.
Mhm.
Get a buddy or find an IT person who can help you. But then who knows? You may discover that you might like getting out too.
Yeah, I was going to say that you can always phone a friend, but it's nothing like meeting the person face to face. Because a lot of time, the art speaks one thing and the personality speaks something else. And if you, as a director or a curator, if sometimes we're willing to go through the bad, or should I say negative personality, because of the importance of the art. But a lot of times we really want to meet people that are easy to work with, who are willing to go the extra mile, who understand that you're on a limited budget, but you're willing to do X, Y, and Z to showcase their work. But as an artist who's, as much as I like the internet, I would only use the internet as an introduction. Don't let that be your source, because artwork that shows up on the screen can show off much differently face to face. And it's that face to face, when I meet you and talk to you, that I get a sense of interest, or I ask myself, I want to see more, then I'm going to come to your studio. But all of that's going to be done basically with that face to face, and possibly going to the internet first to see what you're doing. So
Sige, I would also say make Instagram your friend still, because there are a number of artists that have just gained so much traction, just putting themselves on the internet, working in their studio.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to post the finished works, but just you working on your works in progress. You build an audience, and then they start to share and talk about what you're doing. And I think that's a nice way to dip your toe into putting yourself out there. I'm also an introvert, so I do experience difficult times going to some of these art openings myself. I got about a 30-minute time limit. So I do understand that perspective. So I want to actually, we'll come back to the chat in a minute. Brian, well, yeah, we'll come back to the chat in a minute. I'll get your question next, Brian. So what I want to do right now is just a pivot. I want Eric to talk about the work that he does with the UMGC program, especially the Preston Sampson exhibition. How did that go?
I think my work is really nothing unusual for anybody who's putting on exhibitions, and we've covered a lot of it early on in this discussion. Getting to know the artist and deciding what you want to present, and then the next stage is that finish. You get it up on the wall. You have a big opening. Well, you have an opening, and you pray because only 2 people RSVP, and then the night of, there's 100 people there. So you're glad, and then you're mad at the same time because now you're running out of food. And you're standing up at the podium and you're trying to be nice and say, "Why didn't y'all RSVP?" But that's a different story. From beginning to end is really getting to know the artist and the work. And for us, even with Preston's show, I had known Preston for many years and really liked his colors and the message in his work. To a point where we even had conversations to talk about, this image shows up a lot. Who is it? And then he would share with me who the image was, which is basically his sons. But then I'd end up learning about him, his background, his parents, how they supported his art practice, his teaching, what was he trying to do with his practice, and then learned of the stories that he's trying to share through his art. And it became that's the kind of story I would like to share with my audience, with my community. Can I do it? Is there enough way that I can tell his story from beginning to end? So the audience come in, they see the finished product, but they don't come in and they see the placement of the art, what works in this story, this part of the story, the early works, the mid-career works, the current works, the works that whether or not we decide to paint the walls, if we can afford to do it, to kind of accent the area or to keep the audience moving through the space. The exhibitions, the catalogs, getting the bio, finding the person to write about that person. And what we try to do at UMGC is always put the artist in historical context with those writings. And so that we don't expect people to come to the exhibition and stand there and read, but they can take a free catalog with them and read later on. And catalogs tend to last a long time. We also do like this, the high school exhibition. We felt that there are some talents in high school, and it was an audience that's sometimes overlooked. So we decided to do the Maryland High School Jury Competition, and that's the winner who won the $5,000 award. And the only catch is that the high school students get 50%, and to support the arts program in that school, get the other 50%. It was our way to try to support teachers at the same time, let these students know you have a talent, and then you can move to the next level, become an artist, become a curator, become a registrar. You can work in the field. You actually can make a living in the art world. In my case, I'm a drum major for the visual arts. Preston show, again, we just went in all kinds of directions with that show. We had limited edition mugs done when we hosted the Board of Regents reception. We used Preston's artwork and work from the collection to serve, I don't want to say serve as a backdrop, but to educate them as to what we were doing in the arts program at UMGC, while at the same time introduced him to Preston as the artist, because we wanted him to be there the night of the opening, or in this case, the reception. So it's all of that. This slide was an exhibition we did with Freddie Style and Halima Taha. Halima Taha is a art activist, she's a writer, she's published author, etc. So I contacted her because I knew her, and we had previous conversations about Freddie, and she had never met him, but she's always wanted to do something, write about it. So when we decided to do Freddie's exhibition, naturally, I said, Halima, with you. And Halima was living in New Jersey, I believe, and Freddie lives in Atlanta. And so she flew down, she interviewed him, she wrote the essay, and then she came and did the artist talk. And we don't do artist talks at all of our shows, but we try, again, to present the artwork, the artist, and then let the artist have a chance to hear it from the artist's mouth about his work. And I'm kind of a visual, well, I listen and I look. And I tend to remember things that I'm seeing or things that I've heard, more so than things that I've read, even though that sticks with me too. Okay.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the chat for Eric? Okay, this is from Robin Watts. Hello, Robin. When budgets are tight and logistics are an issue, what's the best way to expose engaged students to museums? Are there online collections curated for 9th through 12th graders?
Yes. Most of my institution, it's not necessarily geared towards 9th through 12th graders. It's geared towards anybody who wants to see portions of the collection online. And so they can just go through the arts program's website and view those works. Most institutions generally have something online that serve as a teaser for you to learn or want to learn more and come out. We really want you to come in versus just push a button.
Okay. Okay, this is from Brian. Does photo editing count as arts?
Myrtis.
All right. That is a loaded question. And I guess in part because what's your source for the photographs? That's the first question. Are they out there, in the public domain? Do you have permission to edit those photos, or are they your own? So that's, but I guess the short answer is yes, it could be considered art, but my question would be like, what are the logistics surrounding that? The legalities, not logistics, but the legalities surrounding that.
I think Myrtis just hit it, because if you don't have the permission to edit someone else's photo, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So you really need to make sure, if you're working with somebody in your community, make sure you have their permission in writing as to what they're letting you do. We have to do the same thing when it comes to copyrighted images. Mm-hmm. We have to make sure that we have the permission to show the work. And that usually that permission tells us that we can't alter the image of the work in any way from what the artist intended. So it's kind of the reverse when it comes to photo editing. You have to make sure that you have your permission. If it is your own photograph, then you can do whatever you want in the editing process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So I have a question for all of you. It may be considered serious, I'm thinking of the artists, especially those who are often underrepresented in gallery spaces on a global scale, pretty much. When faced with structures that feel limiting or gatekept, do you see strategic participation as a form of change making, or do you believe transformation requires more radical rethinking of the system itself?
Mhm.
So my inclination is when I feel that there's some barriers for people to be seen. I guess just instinctually, I decide that they will be seen. So we have made it a point to seek artists from all backgrounds to have in our gallery. So we're in a pretty safe space. Well, semi. I am in Washington D.C. right now, in the nation's capital, but we do make an effort to push past what we think everybody wants to see. We're going to have people be represented who wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity.
I think that it really is it in a nutshell. I don't know if it's change agent. I don't know if it's activist in the museum world, but it's obviously making a difference, or we try to make a difference to have a place for those who might be marginalized or who may be seen as the radical left or right, but their artwork is really, really good and they have something to say. So from our standpoint, we need to show it, and we need the audience to come in and converse with that work, and maybe they will leave with something, something different than what they've heard in the media versus what they know.
Yeah, and for the gallery, I mean, we show American art, but our area of specialization is artists from the African diaspora. And so we certainly feature the works of African American artists. We have 2 Haitian artists on our roster. We've shown work by Afro-Cuban artists, and we've exhibited in Cuba during the Havana Biennale. So, our roster is definitely comprised of artists of color and being somewhat diverse, because we do have artists who are not African or African American or of African descent, but that is our primary area of specialization.
All right, so many of our viewers tonight are students considering careers in the arts, whether that's museums or other aspects of cultural work. What do you wish someone had told you earlier about working behind the scenes in galleries or institutions?
Well, I'm gonna jump in real quick before y'all steal my answer. I was glad that someone told me that I could work in a museum, that I could make a living as an artist. And I can guarantee you it was not my parents. You going into the arts, you're not gonna make a living. But I followed my heart and my desire, and it wasn't anything in life. It's not gonna be easy, but I followed that path. And I just fell in love with what I was doing and what I was seeing. So that's been my path for the past 40 some years, is the arts.
Mm-hmm. So in my world, museology, museography, this is what we do at Duke Ellington. We're training a new generation of museum professionals, and the jobs are so varied, and there are not a lot of people of color in these positions, in this decision-making positions. So in high school, did I know what a conservator was? Did I know what a registrar was? Did I know what a curator was? No. But I am certainly grateful that someone had the idea to make a museum studies department for high school students, because now there's a whole new generation of young people for 30 years now who have gone out with this information and skill set. So I'm sure.
Yeah. And they're going to bring the technology. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, with technology, yeah, the sky is the limit.
The sky's the limit.
Yeah, because
go ahead. I think you were ready to say what I was going to say.
I know, Eric, when we started, you'll see this little pamphlet that I have from 1996. That's how we communicated, snail mail.
Yes.
But it's a whole new world now.
We had a card cataloging system.
Okay.
3x5 cards with the new image attached to it, and it's a different world. It took somebody to learn there's a better way. And so now we've elevated to technology, and then now it's the next generation is to design that next program that can do A through Z versus just A through Z. I mean, A through K. Now we can go A through Z. That person who's now has a tech savvy person that can do that now. Then those are the people who are coming up behind me, since I'm only 22 and a half.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, for me, I'm like you, Marta. The museumology, you know the word.
Yes.
was not part of my vocabulary, and it barely is now. At any other time, I could roll that off my tongue. But what I did have is a father who was an art collector. And I lived as a young child near the DuSable Museum. I was a wandering child. I drove my parents crazy. I grew up in Chicago, and I would walk. We lived in Hyde Park, so I would walk to like the Museum of Science and Industry, the DuSable Museum. No cell phones, people. So there was no way that my parents could stay in touch with me. And I would just leave in the morning, and I go to the library. I was the wandering child, drive my parents crazy. But then there was divine order, because I set out to be a CPA, and then God stepped in. And I went to MICA for 2 years through a 2-year program, but because I'm only 22 and a third, the curatorial program did not exist. So I spent 2 years there, which now it is a master's degree program. So I think as a way of honoring my 2 years there and doing the work, that's how the doctorate degree came about, and also because of my ongoing relationship with the institution. But so it just warms my heart to know about Duke Ellington's program. My path probably would have been what it is today, but it probably would have taken place a lot sooner, because this is my passion. This is where I belong. And I encourage those who are interested, seek out a program like yours, depending on your age. Maybe young folks can go through Marta's program at Ellington. Look to Eric for inspiration and what's going on at UMGC, which their dynamic program, I love. The other thing I'm jealous about, Eric, is I wasn't able to go to Preston's show. I want a mug and I need a catalog, because some of the best catalogs, and I'm always touting this, I've ever had picked up that are free. I keep saying you need to sell those catalogs after I get mine for free. Are the catalogs that are produced through the university's arts program. They are stellar. You talk about scholarship. So the essays, the images, those are the examples that should be in the hands of young folks who want to be inspired to go down this path as a profession. And embedded within those catalogs are the condition reports, the installation, the scholarship, the essays, the research, all of those things that we've shared tonight culminates into that catalog that you walk away with. All that knowledge and understanding, labor and dedication is what helps what you experience visually. It all amounts to what you walk away with. I mean, the program there is just absolutely one that should be celebrated on an ongoing basis. I'm a cheerleader, you know that, for UMGC.
Speaking of that catalog, I'm going to tell you up front, I'm started using it as my blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I've come to the gallery, I've collected a couple of them. I'm using it as
I have a stack. This is the UMGC row right here on top.
You guys are making me very jealous over here.
But I'll say this: I don't know if I could give them away for free.
Yeah.
Well, so far so good. That's all I can say.
Look, is this familiar? Am I kidding or what?
Well, the show just went down. That's a Jerome Gray exhibition.
All right, I'm telling the truth.
Yeah. We try hard. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Marta, come on over and visit with us.
Okay, we'll
do. Too, but come on over. We have a lot of work to do, and again, it's not easy. But when you're talking and preparing the next generation, like I said, there's so many avenues they can go into, even appraisals. They can learn how to do appraisals. Mm-hmm. It's all a part of the business aspect of what we do in the valuations and learning. I mean, all kinds of things they can do. They don't paint like I can't draw a straight line. But I understand. I love art, and now I have my appraisal license. I can do that. So, I mean, there's different things at different segments or different stages in your career that you can go in. I went to undergraduate school to be a lawyer. I was the political science major, and I minored in art history. And it was the art history that stole my heart.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So my other question, especially as it revolves around students, what skills beyond creativity are essential for sustaining this kind of work?
Well, creativity is at the top. And right under that is curiosity. Do you have questions? What do you want to know? What do you think other people want to know? And do you care about yourself, first of all, but do you care about what other people care about? Or is there something you think people need to be aware of that you need to bring to the forefront? So when we do our exhibition, when we do our auditions, we have exercises that we try to use to bring out all of those characteristics. We figure out if you're curious, are you creative, who are you, and what do you care about? So if you just have any of those things, one or all, we think you can probably be successful in museum studies at Duke Ellington. So,
but I think that's that curiosity that's going to take them to the next level. Because even my artists who are older than I am, I still tell them, go to museums, see what's on the wall. Not only you're not just looking for the name of the artist, but you're looking at the artwork itself. Become familiar with the work from a standpoint that you can say, that's a good piece. And you may incorporate something different. Or you can promote yourself as a minimalist. You just like doing line drawing. I mean, there are many artists who've just thrown a line and said, that's my personality, and got a lot of money. But it all begins with, to me, everything that you said, but also a personality. You have to have that personality means a lot as well.
Okay. All right. So Marta, I want to turn the discussion over to you. We've talked about, some of the challenges that are associated with exhibitions and the depth of research, the collaborations that happen. I was impressed to learn about the exhibition you spearheaded, the Buried But Not Dead. Can you please share?
Oh, sure. So I had really just almost come through the door. I think I came through the door at Ellington in 1991, and it was actually 1991 when the burial ground project began. So it was, a project to build a federal building. And when they did the excavation, I'm sure most of you heard about it, so I won't even go into depth, but we learned about it from just studying. We were always looking for interesting topics that are going to teach us something, but also it's something we think that other people would want to know about too. So this was one of them, because there was a real debate about what's going to happen. Are they going to continue to excavate and take these bones that were put there about 200 years prior to the rediscovery? Are they going to take these bones and just toss them to the side and build this federal building, or something else going to happen? So something else did happen. People protested, they petitioned, they had vigils, 24-hour vigils, and they said, okay, halt. They're going to come to a stop, and we're going to do something about this. Well, who's on the scene? There is a Black anthropologist by the name of Michael Blakey, who is out of HU. And he said, okay, we need to get the bones and bring them here to study them to Washington, D.C. Well, there was an opposing school that said, oh, we want the bones. So that was Leland College. So there's a little case, it's decided. Howard gets a chance to study the bones. And why do they want to study them? They want to find out what life was like. We know already, but this is evidence here. So just in simple terms, life was short, life was hard, and most people then died violently. But here we are, a high school with 12, 13, 14-year-olds who get a front row seat to see how these bones are studied and the tests that are done on them. And so we actually go to Howard University. We're sitting there and watching all this go on, but also we were able back then to hire one of the young anthropologists to come help us. And so we decided to do an exhibit to tell the story about the rediscovery of the bones, about how they were cared for, what they learned from the bones, and how, well, we didn't get to this part because it was 2003 that they were reinterred. And then it was 2006 when the memorial was actually made, and it's there now, near where is it? Where the Royal Trade Center used to be. I think it was 209 something. I don't know the exact address, but anyway. So how do we tell this story? We talked about the bones, how they got them, but then we said, okay, we want to give them some information. So this is our immersive element. So we made games. Here's the coffin top with questions about the whole project. And then we made another game, high tech, you guys, very high, low tech. We made a game about learning about your bones. Got 206 of them in my body, so we just had kids learn about a few of them. So it was a great success. Dr. Blakey was totally impressed. And it was some article, I wish I had that, but I do have the brochure that my sister kept for all these years. The exhibition happened in 1996, and she pulled that out, and that made me tell Dr. Eden about that. So this is just one thing that we did that I think we're really proud of. And why? We saw that when you care and you want to be the difference, you can. If you stand up and you're bold, you make your desires known, you can move mountains. So the kids were just really empowered by the fact that this project that could have been one that left people outraged, because these 419 bones of people were going to be just, I guess, tossed aside. But it was stopped. It has a better and not bitter ending, and we can talk about it today. So that's one of hundreds of exhibitions that we've done over the years. Some controversial, some not so much, but whatever it is, we always want to make sure that we have some take home messages for the viewer. And it varies. And that's Museum Studies and the African Burial Ground Project at Duke Ellington.
Okay. Thank you. Marta, this question is for you. Is
Okay.
there anywhere the art from that exhibition is archived?
Oh, okay. So yes, we have it here. The drawing on the front for the invitation that went through the mail, the actual mail is here. Right behind me, if you can see it, we have the top with the Sankofa symbol. I don't know if you can see that.
Yes.
But I actually pulled this out of the closet today. I was just so relieved to see it. But you see those nails, that's how they found some of the tops that were still there. So, and that symbol means to look back to gain information so that we can move forward and be better. So we're still proud of this exhibit. So, yeah, this is what we do. One of the things that we do. Now, all of our students don't become curators. Some of them become fabricators. We've had students go into development, exhibit design, and some become famous artists.
Hank Willis Thomas?
Yeah, like Hank Willis Thomas, yes. So, yeah. So I was going to play a little video, but I don't know if we have time.
Yes,
Dr.
we have time.
We do?
Yes.
Okay. So it's 7 minutes. It goes by pretty quickly, but it just tells you a little bit for those who are interested and maybe they have children or grandchildren or neighbors who may want to get a comprehensive education in museum studies. This is the place to come.
On a hill in the heart of Georgetown, D.C., sits Duke Ellington School of the Arts. Built in 1898, this structure has almost 500 students with a curricula in both the arts and academics. Since 1991, the Museum Studies Department joined the lineup of offerings in the arts, making this program the only comprehensive curriculum in museology for high school students in the United States. So why Museum Studies at Ellington? Peggy Cooper Cafritz, arts activist and co-founder of Duke Ellington School of the Arts, and Richard West, founding director of the National Museum of the American Indian, served on the Smithsonian's Cultural Equity Committee from 1989 to 1993. They concluded that there was a lack of diversity in the institution's professional ranks. What they discovered: in the 1990s, minorities were underrepresented in the professional decision-making elite, comprising less than 5% of the institution's curatorial, design, and educational staffs. Cafritz had the idea to do something about their findings. Here they are, the very first museum studies students at Ellington, the Museum 9. Small in number, yet empowered by knowing the importance of museum work. It was James Weldon Johnson who said, "A society is often judged by the art and culture it leaves behind. Students learn that training in museum work affords them a position of influence. They become the decision makers. Museum studies puts our students at the table. They are included in the narrative." The core curriculum is designed to teach students the theories and practices of the 5 major functions of a museum. Additionally, students are challenged to develop a solid knowledge base in the various types of museums: art, history, science. Students get a heavy dose of problem-based learning and opportunities to use their critical thinking skills. Lots of right brain activity. Our students make art, They learn to build a museum to scale, and they design the signage for our exhibitions. After all, being a creative can add to one's marketability in the museum field. We have a hidden curriculum too. We practice people skills, life skills, self-help, and we encourage our students to make their mark and then to give back. Someone once said, "If you drink from the well, you should develop a desire to replenish it."
Left with was the way that I could think about photographs and it goes back to my museum studies education, because what you guys are learning is what we call critical thinking, which is not something that's really thought about in other fine art practices, especially in high school, where you're actually learning how to think about things. And with our first show that we curated at the National Museum of American History, I really realized that as a curator, your job is to think about how this thing and that thing have a relationship to other things and how they can tell a story about whatever you want to tell a story about.
Come on, are you ready? Do you want to see how we made Peggy Cooper Cafrit's idea of a museum studies department at Duke Ellington a reality? This is how we do it.
This is how we do it. This is how we do it. La 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 la. La 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 la. This is how we do it. La 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 la. This is how we do it. It's Friday night and I feel alright. The party's here on the west side, so I reach for my 40 and I turn it up. Designated driver, take the keys to my truck. Hit the shop cause I'm faded. Honey's in the streets, say money, yo, we made it.
If we play our cards right, museum study students can develop into game changers with a developmentally sound and relevant curriculum, along with talented and compassionate teachers to serve. Our students will have the skills and platform by which to be the difference for humanity in the struggle for social change here and all over the world. Our students will use their artistic skills to create meaningful masterpieces for our hearts, souls to enjoy, and perhaps call us to action. Who knows, our students may go on to use their keen interpersonal skills to raise money for yet another important museum to be built. A former student with a master's degree in museum studies could apply for one of the vacant director's jobs in the Smithsonian and actually get it. Museum studies, limitless.
Sail on, silver sail on by. Your time has come to shine. All of your dreams are on their way.
Marta, thank you for sharing that. This is an impressive program, especially for high school students. Are there any questions in the chat for Marta?
I want to enroll.
Come on down, over.
That is so awesome.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
No questions?
No questions?
That's okay.
Well, we have a comment. Great video, a fantastic way to promote the importance of museum studies. Another comment. Oh, that was from T. Jenkins. Hello, T. Amazing. Warms my heart as a teacher of high school students, Duke Ellington. That is from Robin. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, Can a 56-year-old go to your high school?
Yeah, why not? You can come visit. You can get something from a visit. Yeah.
And you have one more question. You have two more questions. Do you allow local artists to speak? That's from Pirelli Artworks.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Wait a minute. I know Pirelli. I know him.
Okay.
Hi. Yeah. Come on by.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Marta from Segay, can students from out of state apply?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Hmm. There is tuition, though, but it's much less than any other tuition on the planet.
Okay. All right. So, thank you for that presentation. Myrtis, I've had the pleasure of interviewing Ronald Jackson in 2020. I just want to put this out there. I would love to work with him again. He sat for me for the interview, but I would love to see his work here. But anyway, okay. So if you could please share, about his the exhibition Profiles of Color 3, Fabric, Face, and Form. It took place in Baltimore in 2018. So would love to hear about that and the Afrofuturistic exhibition at the Biennale.
Yes, certainly. Well, Ronald Jackson, as you know, is a phenomenal artist. The body of work in which you're speaking in that exhibition was created to talk about the history of Ronald's family. Um, he's from Arkansas, the rural Arkansas, and a lot of his work, at least at that point in time, was talking about the migration, Great Migration period, and his family's migration north. In addition to that, Ronald was experimenting. We love when artists experiment with new materials. And so the masks that are on the wall, and a mask is a device that you see often in Ronald's work, and it's a device because he uses it as a device to get people, and especially white people, to look into the eyes of a Black person. Growing up in his area, you know, uh, Black people, and it was segregated at the time. So, of course, Black people had to divert their eyes and could not look into the face of a white person. And so that mask is a device that draws you in, the viewer in closer to sort of examine who that individual is behind the mask. In many cases, to look into the eyes of a Black person, maybe for the first time. It's a device to conceal. Maybe the person behind the mask doesn't want to be fully known. So it's a metaphor for many things. And I'm excited to share with you, you folks in this discussion will be the first to know that Ronald is having a solo exhibition here. He's our summer show. And so that we're super excited about that. Here you see images. So I should also say that the slide that was previously shown and this one are works by Ronald Jackson. And again, growing up in rural Arkansas, we see images of horses. For Ronald, this is a symbol of power. You see these two beautiful Black women in the center painting there. They're almost angelic in a way, and if you stood before that painting, they almost look like they're about to take flight. So he also is sort of like a fictional realism, realism. The works were just fantastic. So the new body of work he shared will go back to, he was doing a lot of work with just one subject on the canvas, and a lot of those pieces were collage works. So he is taking the new body of work to another level, incorporating some of the materials that he experimented with in this body of work, also now creating works in wood. I mean, Ronald is just, I think Marta said it best. and also, Eric, about imagination. Artists able to use their imagination and expand their imagination in creating and recreating works in a different voice and a different style. So this is another view. Um, in this exhibition, this was my Venice exhibition. The title was the Afrofuturist Manifesto: Blackness Reimagined. So it's centered around three conceptual concepts, and that is considering time, as in the time Black folks have existed, space, the space that we've occupied, being in our homes, outside of our space, claiming space, and then our existence. So we looked at that through the lens of the theory of Afrofuturism. We also looked at it through our spirituality and also through a futurist lens, like what would a Black universe look like? So some of it spoke to like Sun Ra, he was our Afrofuturist guy. I don't think there's an image of it here to share with you tonight, but one of our artists, Philandus Thames,
Yes.
created I can't remember the dimensions now, but it was huge, a beaded curtain, so to speak, with the hair beads that we wear in our hair, and using the binary code, the beads read, space is the place. That was, where, you know, Sun Ra said we need to go so that we can exist and create our own universe. But this view is another view. So the previous slide was the works of the portraits were Monica Ikegwu's, the young man and the young woman. And in the center there, that's another work by Philandus. It's and he uses hair brushes. He uses everyday common tools and he repurposes them to create his work. And the brushes say, "More than the universe interests me, so that I dare to knock at the door of the
Cosmo.
cosmos." Whew, got it. So that was a poem. I think that's a Sun Ra's quote. Oh no, that's a Black futurist quote. And then on to the next image. That's another view of the room. That's you're in the rear of the gallery space now and looking out towards the front. The two large paintings there by R.V. Smith. The sculptures are by M. Scott Johnson, and the one in the center facing away. So we're looking at the back of the pieces was High John the Conqueror. So when looking at time, Scott used High John, which was it's from African folklore, and he was a figure or a subject that the slaves, created him as a fictional character, and they would pray to him. High John would take them away from their suffering. So, we're again creating this space that people entered into. And now this is Venice, Italy, and we're at the Venice Biennale, which is the oldest cultural art fair in the world. And so it draws from people out, from the entire globe. And we then, what it meant for us as a curator and a group of artists to be in a space, international, having an international global presence, to be able to present Black thought, Black theory, Black spirituality, Black resistance, and have autonomy over that, what that narrative was. So it was an absolutely incredible experience.
Thank you, Myrtis. Are there any questions in the chat for Myrtis? Okay, T. Jenkins, I believe I met you at an educators program at Howard Med School in 2024. Who? T?
I hope we did.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Admin free. This is so amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Make sure you tune in for the other sessions too.
So
Okay.
I want to add a comment because we're talking about what happens behind the scenes.
Yes.
And I think it might be interesting for people to know who haven't visited Venice that there are no land vehicles. It's like, an island, right? So the artwork comes in on a boat. Everything is done by boat and then cranes to take. And our exhibition space was in a palazzo that was hundreds of years old. So I don't know. That was probably one of the most interesting and challenging logistics planning that we've ever had to do. And Scott's sculptures weigh hundreds of pounds. So kudos to the brothers and the sisters and the men. Actually, they were Italian guys who were able to lift those heavy sculptures not only up the stairs to our exhibition space, but also get them up on those pedestals. So, I mean, they're marble, black solid marble. So it was quite an experience.
Any other questions? We're good on the chat? Okay. From Prelly Artworks, what advice would you give an artist whose career spans over 30 years on how to have a retrospective show?
Well, I think Mr. Key might be the best person to answer that.
Oh, I knew you. Okay. Let's see. What advice? Again, market yourself. Have the works ready to go. That means framed and ready to go. But the biggest thing is just present yourself in a nutshell. Sometimes museum plan 2 years out, so keep that in mind. And sometimes you have a hole in the schedule where you can be ready to run in, within 2-3 months. But most of us plan years, at least a couple of years out. But always be out there just marketing yourself. Also, I wanted to say, participate in juried exhibitions. Even if you're not accepted, participate, because that alone helps us to become familiar with you as an artist. And I'll give you a prime example today. We're planning for our biennial, it was the BMRA, the Biennial Maryland Regional Juried Art Exhibition, open to Maryland, DC, and Northern Virginia artists. And there were almost 150 artists who participated, but we had to narrow it down to 45 works. But I've received a phone call today of department who wants to commission an artist to do a limited edition piece that they can give as awards. And so what we did is we went through all 150 works, and several of the pieces that were not selected for the show were interesting enough for her to say, I want to take another look. That's one part of it. But at the same part as the director, I get a chance to go through there and look at the works. And we keep most of those images on file so that if there's a special exhibition that we're doing, let's just say portraitures, I can always make sure that artist gets the information. So it's really, I really encourage people to participate in juried shows. Get your packages out there, send information out there. Yes, you're going to be worrying us to death, but that's what you have to do.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your insight, your generosity, and honesty. Conversations like this remind us that exhibitions are not neutral, they're built through care, labor, ethics, and intention. This has been the first session of Before the Doors Open, and we invite you all to engage with us for the remaining conversations as we continue to build a gallery grounded in transparency, learning, and responsibility. Are there any closing comments my guests would like to share?
Mine is to you. Keep up the good work. We need you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to thank you for this convening. Discussions like this are so important, and I wish you very much a lot of success in your role. Institutions on the campus, of learning, a place of learning, as Marta is responsible for, are really critical for our next generation of artists, art practitioners, and, especially when they're uncensored and rooted in truth and equity. So happy to see what's going on. I'm the introvert, so sometimes I'm so planted here that I miss all the wonderful things that are happening beyond my gallery walls. So it's just so wonderful to see all the dynamic things that are going on in the community.
So I'm so grateful. I think we need each other, and we should continue to communicate and share dialogue, expertise, and just fellowship so we can help each other. Because I can see that each one of us has something that the other one can draw upon. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So join us next time for session 2, titled Art Careers Start Here. I will be talking with artists Ralston Cyrus and Ray Hyun about the workforce and their 20 plus years working as creatives. Stay tuned in by subscribing to PGCC TV or by visiting our website to check on our events, upcoming events, and to stay checked in, locked in. All right. Good night.